Good afternoon.
Good
How is
afternoon.
everybody?
Been a great day back. First day this week.
Oh, so y'all came back this week. School was out here in Mecklenburg, and it was out in Cleveland. I'm guessing it was out in Gaston in between. I went to campus today. Everything shut down. I don't know. The roads are going to be bad if it freezes tonight, because water was running in the roads everywhere today. So we'll see how it goes and get this. Hopefully this will be gone just in time for the next one coming in over the weekend. So how wonderful. Well, welcome back, everybody. This is Mels 603. We appreciate you being with us. Thanks to Dr. Hallman and Dr. Griffin Jordan for being with us as well. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'll share my screen. A couple of housekeeping things. Please make sure that you do enrollment and verification under course overview. Go ahead. I actually had one person who checked no. So you might want to go back and revisit that. If you check no, but make sure that you have done your enrollment verification. I noticed we still had a couple today that hadn't done that, so please do that. Again, it's under course overview, enrollment verification activity. So if you go in and do that, that'd be great. All right, so let's start out tonight by a review of a couple of questions that I had on the OMA. So let me move this out of the way. Get that over to the side. Let's see. So, okay, the first question I had was about federal programs. What do you do about the federal programs, and what if you don't have one of these federal programs? Well, the notion in your internal context of the OMA is we want to identify what programs we do have. These are the 5 types of programs that you could have. Exceptional children, 504, those aren't the same thing, but they're in the same vein. And the intervention team referrals, those kids get the same rights. They get the same rights as exceptional children, 504s. Title I, school or program, some sort of English as second language, whatever your district refers to it as. Academically gifted in career and technical education. These are all federal programs. This is the one that the federal government gives you money and pays for your teachers. So what we need to know is which of these you have at your school, which ones you have, what the student's supposed to get in that program, and then what they are actually getting. That's what we want to know. Let me. Okay, mute everybody. So what we want to know is, do you have an EC program? All right, what are they supposed to get? Is it mainstream? Is it pull out? Is it what format is your EC program? What are the kids supposed to get? What do they do get? Inclusion, is it an inclusion model? And what is it that your district says that they're supposed to get, and what do they get? Do you have 504 program? Do you your intervention team? What are they supposed to get? MTSS? Are they supposed to get all 3 levels? Does your school offer all 3 levels yet? They're supposed to get all 3. That's what we're asking you is what have you got? What are they supposed to get, and do they get it? Because if they don't get it, then you need to address it in your master schedule as to why they're not getting it. That's the whole notion here. If they're getting what they're supposed to, kudos, good deal. But if not, can we address it in our master schedule to make sure that they get what they're supposed to be getting? therein lies the notion here of why you audit your federal programs. And that's why you start with them first when you start scheduling, because they are the most restrictive. They have the most regulations. They are the most restrictive. And remembering the federal government pays for them. And if you misspend their money, they won't give it to you anymore. They'll take back, they'll demand that you rebate it, and they won't give it to you. So you got to know what your federal programs are about, which ones you've got, how well they're working. If not, then you can address them. You can address those in your master schedule. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to go to each of our resident principals for a couple minutes here. This is a short answer. If you can think of one, give me an example of a way in your master schedule at a school that you've been that you were able to address an issue with a federal program that was not produced or not serving as designed. If you can think about one of those, I'll turn it over to either of you or both to give me an example of what we're talking about. I'm going to give mine when I get these. I'm going to give mine.
Okay,
Right.
go ahead.
All right, go ahead. I'm listening.
Just an example of, for instance, we have a small English language learner population, and we only have one teacher because our school population is so small. So within the master schedule, we make sure we sit down with that teacher, gather the students who will need to be supported. We make sure that they're placed, since again, we don't have the team, we have the one. Make sure in the master schedule, if they need English support, they're placed in the same class for English support so that he can push in during days that the teacher's introducing new concepts, and then he can pull those students out for times that he needs to remediate. So that is a crucial portion of our scheduling process, is to make sure those groups are with, whether it's the EC teacher, ESL teacher, or if they have a 504 program, making sure that they are scheduled so that they can receive the services during that time period or the period during the day that they need it.
Okay, great. Dr. Holloman.
Talk about different federal programs at the high school level, middle school level specifically. You'll have career and technical education programs also. Federal dollars flow through there, and you are still required to provide a certain level of services to students that are taking those courses. Licensure becomes an issue. And so if you are doing scheduling, you need to make sure that you're keeping those individuals in their licensure bucket along the same way with those federal programs, because if you don't, then they will come back and they'll tap you about 3 months into the school year and let you know that those federal dollars are not being appropriately used. So a business teacher can't teach a course outside of their licensure area, because if they are, the federal dollars don't flow to that person in that licensure area. So those are things that I know for us outside of EC and 504 that we also pay attention to, just because those dollars can very quickly be taken away from you if you don't use them correctly.
Excellent. And so I'm going to piggyback on that. And Kayla, we'll get to you. I think Kayla raised her hand. We'll get to her. Just mine is very quick, and it piggybacks on Dr. Hallman's. I had exactly the opposite. When I became a high school principal in Charlotte, I moved from the junior high to the high school. I inherited a photography teacher in the CTE program. Only problem was photography 6 years prior had been deleted, and the federal government no longer sent the money to teach photography. But he had built quite a following and was shooting school pictures, doing the annual, and had a photography lab, and it was completely over the top, except we were having to use a state paid English teacher position to pay. When I got there, and trust me, the state did not appreciate that, because all of our English classes in 10th grade were overloaded. And so I had to rebate a bunch of money to the state as soon as I got there. And we had to close photography that day, which made me the #1 villain in the community. And especially with the photography teacher, he told everybody what, a turd I was all over town, because he didn't want to teach English. But that's what we're talking about. So when you're looking at your master schedule, you got to look at these federal programs and make sure that they're teaching what they're supposed to be teaching. They're in field, they're providing the program with fidelity as intended. And that's the first thing that you look at in your schedule, because those people, the feds, do not play. You lose your money and you are you're in a bad way. Kayla, your question is.
Hi, my question is, well, I'm just trying to make sense of all of this because my school, so I work at a high school and there's only inclusion in 9th grade, like for English and math. Like 10th, 11th, and 12th, there's not, because my school just has this, I guess, I don't know what you call it, underlying understanding that we try to wean students off of inclusion. So I guess like the maximum support would be, and a lot of their students come in as 9th graders having inclusion math, inclusion English, and a resource class built into their day. But when it comes to 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, the most they can get is the academic support class. There's no inclusion. I just don't know how to write about that because as well as stick to facts versus like inserting my opinion, because I actually am an EC teacher and I've seen like students on my caseload who are like 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. They really need inclusion support, but they just tell us to write the IEP such that, the most support they can get is resource by the time they're in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. I don't know how to define our program if it's not like inclusion at every grade level.
You just define it just like you just explained it. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to make it be right or wrong or whatever. You just, data is data. It has no value. It just is. You just tell us what you've got.
Okay. Thank you.
You're not doing an evaluation. An audit does not mean evaluation. I've been clear to make sure that thank you, Caleb, for the terminology is audit. Audit just says, what have you got? It doesn't have evaluation passes judgment on what you got now.
Okay.
If we did that, what we would say is you ought to have inclusion for everybody, and they ought not be telling you what to write in IEP. But I ought not lost my hair at such a young age, as handsome as I was.
Well, can I piggyback on that just for a second?
Me being handsome or losing my hair?
More of the inclusion discussion. The hair thing, I can't really relate to it. I don't understand. But Kayla, I'll say this: every school I've ever worked with does it differently, and sometimes it's a district decision. Sometimes it is the EC department chair. Sometimes it is simply what you have available and the kids you have on your caseload. And so the IEP team really does make that decision. I've been in the situation that you're in, though, of trying to find out where can we find the balance. And, as you're writing it, you may want to think about, as you're looking at the next school year, how do you advocate or work with the master schedule to find a way to maybe add it to one more class in the 10th grade year? You could use this opportunity as an audit to take that opportunity to talk to the department chair or the principal or maybe the EC director, whoever it might be, about maybe adjusting something. And then again, you're in IEP season now, you could actually begin to layer those IEPs so that way you could actually have those things implemented for the next school year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When I worked in Burke County, which is in northwestern North Carolina, when I worked up there, when I was the principal there, the hard and fast rule was nobody was to ever write homebound services in an IEP, ever. I had a kid that needed homebound services. And I don't mean a little bit needed. I mean, he was the worst case I've ever seen that needed homebound services. And thankfully, we were able to get that for him, to get people to understand there should never be hard and fast. The whole notion of this individualized education plan is it's individualized. And kids get what they need. And as Dr. Holland said, this is the perfect opportunity to have some of those critical conversations. Not in a threatening way, or you're supposed to have this, but this kid needs that. I'll never forget Lonnie. Lonnie was completely such a sad case. But it's been that was in that's 32 years ago, and I won't forget Lonnie still 32 years later. But we were able to finally get Lonnie some homebound services because we were able to eventually show the need. And then it started with Lonnie, and we were able, as kids needed it after that, we were able to get some. But it takes that first case sometime. But I'll never forget Lonnie. So that's what you're doing when you're doing your internal audit of your school, when you're looking at your federal programs. You're looking at what we got, what are they supposed to get and what they're getting. It's not an evaluation, it's an audit. You're just reporting what you have. Now, the other thing that came up in terms of the OMA, let me read my notes here. Was about equity and inclusion. Well, let me share my screen. The last bullet in the prompt speaks to that. I can get rid of that now. So when we look at the prompt, equity and transparency, that goes along with the last one, which is how much input does the school improvement team have in building the budget? The school improvement team includes the principal, maybe an administrator, parents, community members, and even in secondary school, sometimes students and teachers. All these people come in. If the school improvement team has a role in developing the school budget, there will be equity and there will be transparency. And that's why we ask you specifically to find out in the budgeting process, how much input does the school improvement team have? That makes sure that all the voices are heard, that there's a chance for equity. There's a good chance we're going to support the school improvement plan, which is all about equity and transparency. That's what we're talking about here, is in your budgeting process. Does the principal just get the financial secretary and go hide in a room and then send everybody a copy of the budget? And then when people come and ask from it at the front desk, tell them we don't hand it out, which is against the law, by the way. Is that what happens? Or is it an open, inclusive process that's transparent and we know how it's done? Is it done with the school improvement team? Now, let me explain what equity is and what equity isn't. Equity is everybody gets what they need. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody gets everything that they want, or that and budgeting doesn't mean we take the pot of money and split it up and everybody gets the same. That's not equity either. Equity speaks to what you need. And we set priorities. If our priority in our budget is reading, we've got to put money behind reading. That's what equity means. If our priority is math, we got to put money behind that. But again, transparency means, do you involve this school improvement team that has professionals, lay people, staff, students, has community, has all these people on this makeup of this team for transparency, so that you can't say that, well, he just met with these people over here. He just met with the English department, or he met with the third grade, or he just met with the business community and came up with this. Did everybody have a seat at the table? That doesn't mean everybody gets everything they want. Did everybody have a seat at the table? That's what transparency means. And that's what equity means. So it's the most important thing when you conclude your task one. How does your principal put the budget together? If you don't know, that's a problem. If you don't know, that's a problem. Or if nobody knows, if you go ask them and you say, oh, we do it for school improvement team. Or me and the financial secretary look at what we spent last year, add a few dollars of that or take a few from here or there, and that's how we do it. No, that may be how it's done, but that's not how it should be done. That's the whole notion. So those are the two things that the questions that came up from the OMA this week. Hopefully, things are going well. The OMA, if we look at our weekly schedule, I'll close that now. If we look at our weekly schedule, I'd like for those to start coming in, those OMA ones to start coming in Sunday night. Remember, we work before the beat. So this is due before this class. If you get it in by next Wednesday, I'll be happy though. With all that's happened with school closures and snow and all the stuff that's going on, I would like to begin to see these Sunday night if at all possible, your OMA task force. And I will give you feedback immediately. Now, Saturday, I got class all day Saturday, but I'll get to you Saturday evening if they come in during the day Saturday. But I'll turn them around in just a few hours, other than from 9 to 5 on Saturday when I have class. Other than that, I'll get them back to you immediately. I'd like to see those start coming in. All right, so let's talk about our assignment for the week, which was to locate copies of school emergency plans. And you were to read school law pages 14 through 17 in the successor plan. So here are my thoughts on the things that you have sent to me this week. I'll stop my share. All right, I really like Mevin's notion that it's really important to communicate effectively. I thought that was a really, when she, I think her point is sending out an email or a blast is not really communication. You got to make sure that people are receiving the communication, to communicate effectively. Make sure that you do it in a way that you know that people know what the plan is and how it should be done. I also liked the notion that Kayla had, realistic conditions. Now, I'm guilty of this, having the fire drill at a certain time every month and never having it during lunch, or, don't have it during bus duty or car, having it at convenient times and telling everybody you're going to have it. For your crisis plan to work, you got to do things that are not convenient. You got to do a fire drill while they're at lunch, and they have to get up and leave their lunch. You got to do that. That's we don't practice under realistic conditions, and then we are completely, then we're surprised when it doesn't go well, when something actually happens. So that was a good point. Nancy said her school was good at Junaluska. Let's see. Marissa and Cherie made a good point. That once you go around and do your audit at your school, or you go around and do your safety audit, or you look at your crisis plan and you do that, or you do your building inventory, you should share these things with your administration. Now, don't wait till the faculty meet and stand up and tell everybody how unsafe it is, or show you're behind it that way. What I'm talking about is you should share what you find when you've done this audit of the crisis plan, active shooter, fire drill, tornado, safety, facilities assessment. You should share those things with your administration, and hopefully they will get better, because everybody's safety it should be number one priority. And so I thought that was a great point from both of them. Matt had a good idea. He says he's working on getting everybody a radio. I think that's an outstanding idea. That would be really good if everybody could have a radio or access to a radio. I think that's a good suggestion. When you've got multiple campuses, buildings on a campus, I think that really works well. Jessica said make sure everybody is aware of the plans, because sometimes we just post them in folders. Everybody's not actually aware. We have communicated them by putting them in a folder, but we haven't made everybody aware. And I liked her notion of a mid-year review, to review the plan again at mid-year and make any changes or additions, or after you've run some drills a few times, you may have to update them mid-year. I thought that was an excellent suggestion. And then Jennifer I like the notion is she said she was reading the crisis plan and found out she was a runner. That was news to her. Make sure everybody knows what their roles are. I think that's a great, if you've got this wonderful safety plan, does everybody know that what their part of the plan is, or that they're even in the plan? I thought that was an excellent catch. That was my favorite from Jennifer. If I have a part in the plan, you might ought to tell me. And so that was a really good one. And so I'm appreciative of that, Jennifer. But a lot of your work was excellent, by the way. Excellent work. You researched, you did your reading. You knew what you were looking for. You did the ones that have come in, and most everybody's turned in. They were excellent. They were excellent, and I'm hoping all your task ones and OMA will be as well. All right, so now we're actually 5 minutes ahead. We're doing really good tonight. All right, I'll pause and catch my breath. Anybody have any questions on their first task? In task 1 of the OMA, anybody have any other questions? Is there anything else that I need to cover on task 1 of the OMA? You can either chat, you can open your microphone. Anything else that I need to cover this week on the OMA task 1? I'll cover task 2. Again, to say all you have to do is take the APTEL. That's the second one you did last semester. Copy tasks 1, 2, and 3. Take the APTEL labels off, add the OMA labels, and you're done. It's 30 minutes or less, just like Domino. 30 minutes or less, you're through with task 2. Task 1, everybody's good. All right, your activity this week, you did a great job. Those of you who haven't done it, your discussion board on your crisis plan, do that. I'm going to go to our resident principals right quick to close out this segment. And tell me something I don't know, resident principals, about crisis plans that you do now that I didn't do 20 years ago. What's new in the world of crisis plans?
Well, for us in Durham, everything is digital. When I first started, everything was in paper form. Now we have to log in, and we call it a SERP, which is our school response management plan. That is all digital, where we have to download the floor plan and everything in between. Everything is just digital. So you're going to have to be up on making sure you have all of your pieces in place, because what happens is at the end, the district can just look and there's checkoffs for them, and they can see if there's a check or an X if you have completed that portion of your plan. So they don't have to read through 50 pages anymore. So you've got to be on point. So that is something that I've had to come to terms with, that was new now.
Thank you.
I think a couple of things about the remoteness. I can tell you from where we were until where we are now, all of our law enforcement officers have access, or can have access to, our cameras remotely. They have access to our bell system remotely. They really want us to just shelter in place, and then in that crisis plan, we just provide them all the information, and then they can communicate with us on secure lines in the building if they need to. But we have in our crisis plan now things regarding social media. We have things regarding what if a text is received, what if a post is made. It's not just a phone call coming in or something happening on the campus itself now. So we have to be aware that there is a very broad net that's cast, and so you have to kind of have all of those pieces in place and where the information comes from. And I think that's been a big change on my end, I guess, for what I've seen over the years. It's just a very different, and I think like Dr. Griffin Jordan was saying, it's a digital world now, and so be aware that everything is going to be there in that one place digitally.
Yeah, I would recommend that in your crisis box in the front office underneath the front counter, I would recommend for schools to continue to have things hard copy, because if I were a villain like in a Bond movie, first thing I'd do is jam all communications where you couldn't access anything online or on the
It's still a requirement. We still have to
Yes.
have those in multiple locations of the building. So they have
Right.
points of egress and entrance, but we have to also have everything uploaded to a secure server
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, you have to have a secure server, but that does not do away with the idea that you still have to have all these things in paper. Now, to conclude this segment, for those of you who are familiar with Butler High School, is on the east side of Charlotte in the little town of Matthews. See, a question popped up here. We're not ready for questions quite yet. I'll get to you in just a second, Brandon. They had a school shooting. Was that last year or year before? The year of the pandemic before it started. I think it was in the fall of the year. They had a school shooting, and they had to evacuate the building. Now, to Dr. Holloman's point, police want you to shelter in place, but sometimes if you have a gas leak, you have the building's on fire, you have a gas leak, sometimes you have to leave your building. In your crisis box, there are plans for 3 different types of evacuation. One evacuation is you leave the building and go to a place on your campus, like the ball field for a fire drill. That's evacuation 1. Evacuation 2 is you leave your building and you walk to a nearby place like a church or a parking lot or a shopping center or something like that. And then evacuation number 3 is you walk off your campus to that place, and then buses pick you up and they bus you to a central location somewhere else, like a coliseum or a place where all of you could go. That place is not far enough away. During the shooting at Butler and Matthews a couple years ago, unfortunately, they hadn't practiced any of those plans, hadn't communicated any of them. Some parents thought they were at the ball field. They weren't. They drove around the back. They weren't there. Some people thought they were at the church. They weren't there. And then they had walked to the church and bust them elsewhere, and nobody could find their kids. And that's all that was on the news for a week until finally they fired the superintendent, which he should have been fired anyway, because some village was missing their idiot. But that's beside the point. But they couldn't get off the news cycle, and that's one of the things that you've got to understand, that I'll tell you early on here. Now, if you think I'm a hard and crass person, guilty. But here's the deal: when I was in the central office and supervised principals, I tell them all the time, we got to get off the news cycle. If we stay on the news cycle in Charlotte, if we go past 3, so something happens and we're on the morning, noon, and evening. If we're on 11 o'clock that night on the 4th time, we're in trouble. I'm gonna have to probably send somebody home. I can't tell you the number of times that I sat and hoped or prayed for, and I'm a bad person, I'm full disclosure, but I was hoping there'd be a shooting on the west side to get us off the news. Not anybody be killed, just a flesh wound or something like that, or maybe that somebody would rob a check cashing place. Just get us off the news before I have to fire somebody. You can't beat the news cycle. I know that sounds kind of crass and cold or whatever, but you got to avoid those situations. And when you're in them, there's a lot of times it spins beyond your control. Something you thought wasn't that important or that wasn't that big a deal. If you can't get off the news, there must be blood. We have to send somebody home in order to, whatever metaphor you want to use, so we can get the hounds at bay. And so the whole notion here is this kind of stuff just gets a life of its own. This safety, security, crisis stuff, evacuating to the wrong place or sending out the wrong information. They tweeted out the wrong location to where the kids would be. They told them they'd be at the church and they weren't there. They went to level 3 evacuation because they didn't have the gunman under control, and the church is just across the street. They couldn't find the gunman, and so they had to bust them on out. But they'd already told people they'd be at the church. They weren't at the church. It just, every news cycle, they had another aggrieved parent on there. You thought they would, well, I better not say that, but they had another aggrieved parent on the TV. Every news cycle, just on and on and on and on until finally, the superintendent had to go home. And a couple of other people had to go home as well. So that's what we're talking about. Again, you don't want to lose your house. We're talking about your job here. This stuff is, you got to take it seriously. You got to practice it. You got to do the right thing. All right, so back to the question that we had. Brandon, you had a question? So he's got a question about housekeeping. Discussion boards are due by what day? Everything's due by Sunday. Sunday is our day. And so let's go back and look at our weekly schedule. Sunday at 9 o'clock is our time. And then you have, and I give you grace until the next week's class. So looking at this, I covered that. And so this is due before, this is due this Sunday before class this week. This is the due date before this class this week. Again, this was due before this class this week. You should have already done discussion board 1. Remember, we work in front of the beat. So when it says assignments, this should be done. Assignment 1 should be done before January 19th class. I like them by Sunday night, but I'll give you till Wednesday night. Get them in by before the next class. Again, this was due. This OMA will be due before next week or by next week. Sunday night, preferably, as will discussion board 2. These 2 columns are due before this date here. We work before the beat. Remember, not Willie Nelson after the beat. Because tonight I'm going to talk about this. So next week in class, I'm going to talk about this one, discussion board 2, at the beginning of class. I'll do a follow-up on that one next week before I get into the class content. You should have it done. If not, you'll just, but again, there is no late work, but just try to have your work done so that you will know when we come to class time and you can be up to date and you can contribute to the conversation. That's a great question. All right, so what have we got for our content tonight? Here is the link to North Carolina General Statutes. I'm going to go ahead and click on those. So what you're going to find is all the school statutes in North Carolina are under 115C, and there's about 545 of them. In South Carolina, they're called titles. They're organized a little bit differently, but there's about the same number of them, and it addresses everything. The one that you are is most relevant to you, and it, as an administrator in training, is 288, 115C 288. Let me get to it here, and we're going to cover it more in depth next week. But I want to introduce it to you this week so you can be reading it. That's the duties and powers of the principal. I'll do that. And so here it is, 115C 288, duties and powers of the principal. Again, there's 545 of these, but this is the one that's most relevant to you and most relevant to this course because we have to follow the law. And the first one is the duties, the power and duty of the principal to grade and classify pupils, not teachers. You better know that for your first case study. Your very first case study is about a teacher who assigns a failing grade. Can she do that? Has she followed policy? Is it arbitrary and capricious? Is it a illegal zero tolerance policy? Can you give a failing grade on an activity for the entire year? No. Student may fail that activity, but can't fail for the entire year because that's illegal. That's a zero tolerance expulsion. You got to know these things. There'll be reading to do that goes along with it, but it's your job to do this. Grades are a big deal in every institution. And so even at the college level, we get more grade appeals than anything else to the EPSC, the Ed Policy and Standards Committee. I'm chair this year for the college, but we get grade appeals all the time. And so you need to understand whose responsibility is to do that. To make accurate reports to the superintendent and the board, you have to do those things. Improve instruction and community spirit, conduct fire drills, inspect for fire hazards. Everybody knows you have to do a monthly fire drill, but not many of you knew that twice a month you got to do a safety inspection of your building. That's why we have that inventory in there. You can start that activity. You're going to have to do that later on in your discussion boards and do one. That's why I've got it in there this week so that you can see that. Let's look at that right quick. This is what you use to do that twice monthly inspection. If your district doesn't have one, if they don't have a form, you can use mine, but I'd like for you to use mine and assess your building as well. That's going to be one of your weekly activities and discussion board of getting around the building. You're required to do this twice a month. And let me tell you, if there's a fire or something like that at your school, even if it's just a trash can fire, first thing that people from the central office and the fire marshal are going to do is going to come running out and ask you for the documentation that you've been doing safety inspections in your building. That's the very first thing you're going to be asked for. And so that's why that's there. Back to our laws. To protect school property, to report certain acts to the law enforcement and superintendent. We're going to cover that on the discipline night. That's a biggie. To make available school budgets and school improvement plans. See what I told you? If you got one of those principals that said, oh, we don't hand out the school budget. Yeah, you do. It's a public document. Or we don't give out our school improvement plan. Yeah, you do. It's a public document. Says so. The principal shall maintain a copy of the school's current budget and school improvement plan, including any amendments to the plan, and shall allow parents of children in the school and other interested persons, that would be you or me, to review and obtain such documents according to Chapter 132 of the General Statute. I can't tell you how many times I have students come back to me and say, my principal said we don't give those out. Yeah, you do. The law says you do. Don't make me have to go to court over this. To evaluate licensed employees and develop mandatory improvement plans. That's what you did last semester when you did your professional growth plan, and you remember that. You have to evaluate them, do walkthroughs and formal observations, and you have to put a professional growth plan in for your building. And if teachers aren't keeping up, you have to do an improvement plan for them, an action plan. You remember MTSS for teachers, what that I put in there and showed you last semester when you did the APTEL? That's what we're talking about. That's a legal requirement. To transfer student records, to sign driving eligibility certificates, obtain necessary consent from parents for DMV, and establish school improvement teams. Each school year, the principal should ensure that a school improvement team is established. 115C 105.27 for the purpose of developing, reviewing, and revising the school improvement plan. So if we go to 105.27, was that 105? Yeah, right here. Right here are the rules. Principal of each school, representative, assistant principal, instructional personnel, instructional support personnel, teacher assistants, and parents of children enrolled in the school shall constitute a school improvement plan. All those groups have to be represented. Parents shall be elected by parents of the children enrolled in the school. And sometimes we even put community members that don't have parents. And they're subject to open meeting rules. So the notion of equity and transparency means you have to use this format so that everybody has a seat at the table when you're doing your school improvement plan. And the question is, what seat do they have at the table when the principal does the budget? That same group should be involved in the budget to make sure that there's alignment. All right, I'm going to stop my share and pause again. I'm going to go to our resident principal experts, and they're going to tell us, they get 5 minutes each. They're going to tell us tonight how they go about forming their school improvement team.
All right, I'll go first this time.
Okay.
So we, and I'll say this, when I began as principal of this school, I came in, there were no bylaws. And the principal that was there before me had two different basically groups. One was the school improvement team, and those were individuals that were voted on by the staff, represented each department, and then they met once a month. And then he had a leadership team that he handpicked that he met with twice a month, and made most of the decisions that they then gave to the school improvement team. Don't do that. Don't have two different governing bodies, that one that you handpick and one that is representative of the faculty. You are an advisor as a principal. You are typically going to be there more than anything else to serve as a tiebreaker almost at times, and to provide some guidance and leadership if there are things that are happening at the district level. But we began our school improvement team selection really by having the bylaws that we have created with the school improvement team and the staff that they voted on and ratified, allowing for representation from all departments, regardless of whether the individual is a department chair or a grade level chair. They have included individuals to be included as far as a beginning teacher representative, classified representative, students from Student Government Association can be involved. There really is an open election that occurs, and they select their own individuals. The team then is formed, and then they select who among the team are going to be the president, vice president, chair, vice chair, however you want to word it. And then that typically is a 2-year stint for all of them. And that rotates every 2 years so that we have a relatively consistent group there. But it also brings in new blood. What you don't want to have is the same 10 or 12 or 20 people sitting around the table every year. If that happens, you won't get new ideas. So you have to make sure that you're helping to facilitate a way for that school improvement team to have some transition, to bring in some newer teachers also, and to make sure that all of your teaching areas are represented. So I'll give you an example of one thing we did. Our career education department is pretty large. We made sure we divided that up. So it's not just one person representing the entire department. One comes from the trade and industry part of it. One comes from the business and family consumer science side. So that way it's evenly split. That way one person from the department of 20 isn't making all the decisions for every single teacher, because that's not all their specialty areas. And we meet regularly. We break up into subcommittees. We typically take on action items. We try our best to make sure that we're looking at what we call success points. What are we doing this month? What are we attacking or trying to address? And then, having a follow-up the following month at the main school improvement team meeting from what our committees have been doing. So action items are there, things are being done, and we see that occurring on a regular basis. And then people are more engaged. If you just show up, listen to the principal talk for an hour, listen to their agenda, people are disengaged, and typically they're not going to want to serve in that role.
Thank you. Dr. Griffin Jordan?
Very similar to what Holloman indicated. We, of course, school improvement team is elected. That is a part of our teacher working conditions survey. So if your team is not elected, it's going to show, because your staff is going to say, no, they weren't elected, they were appointed. So that is where we start at the beginning of every year. We do this process once a year at the beginning of the school year during our staff retreat. We discuss, among other things, the roles, the purpose first of the school improvement team, and the roles that the members will play, the expectations as well. And we review the current school improvement plan, because each year we get new students. So each year the plan is going to shift just a bit. So it is always a working document. We have teachers, whether they're instructional staff members, non-instructional like counselors, parents, we have a couple of students, and of course, admin, classified personnel, all inclusive on our school improvement team. We do have a process manager. She happens to be our tech champion, very good with everything digital. So she's, typing away during the meetings. She is the one that composes everything for the district and the one that we have it, of course, you have to have it on your website. So she puts our summaries on the website for any and everybody to log on to see. And then we have many task managers that manage certain action steps. So in the beginning of the year, data, I'm a data person. We look at data. Data drives the plan. So based on what our data indicates, that's how we develop our goals. We have a student hallway, and then of course, in the back where the teachers' mailboxes are, we have, we took them down now because we're moving on, but we had big poster boards with our goals, and we sought input for our teachers as well as our students to put as far as academics. What do you need to improve our academics? Another goal was our family and community engagement. We wanted to boost that up. So that was the equity portion and everything. We always make sure we have input from our students and our teachers throughout the process. So now that we've done that portion, we're moving on to other parts of our school improvement plan. And we do this each year at the beginning of the school year.
Thank you. Do either of you have a student representative on your school improvement plan, a non-voting member?
We have 2 students, one
Excellent.
freshman and one senior.
Excellent.
And we have 2, they're both members of the school, Student Government Association.
I
They
think
select from that group.
that's wonderful. So as you can see, we started out this class with safety, security, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety, security, crisis plans. I hate that we have to start there, but in these times we do. But now we have shifted gears away from that and to the governance piece. What is your role as a school principal in school governance? What are your duties and responsibilities in school governance? It's not to simply make the master schedule and hand it to everybody or make the budget. You have to involve all these people. It's mandated that you do these things. You can't just go behind closed doors and do this. If you do, it won't go well for you. Not in terms of equity and transparency. And just like Dr. Griffin Jordan said, teachers will reject these people if you just name people to your school and your school improvement team and they weren't elected, because that's the process. That speaks to the governance piece. Now, I don't know how many of you all may have known this. This is something that I'm not sure that I knew until I got into school administration, the actual governance piece of this, and had a school law course. It's not something you talk about every day, and it's not something that teachers and folks who aren't administrators know a lot about. But you need to look at the governance piece. You need to read 115C 288 and be well versed in what your governance responsibilities are. Now, to close us out tonight, I'm going to talk about my top 10, and then I'm going to give each of our resident experts an opportunity. These are the 10 things that I think that kind of trip you up legally faster than anything else in that governance piece and the extension of that governance. I'm going to share my top 10 things that will get you sooner than anything else. So let me get into that, and that's how we'll close the evening. Let me move that out of the way. This is Dale's top 10s. All right, so here we go. No Child Left Behind still is on the books from 30 years old last year, from 1991. The rules about low performing and persistently dangerous will trip you up. Low performing, academically, if you're you're below 50% on grade level, if you're not making growth, that there are sanctions that will happen to you. Governance law sanctions will happen to you and you will be removed. What most folks don't know is there's a corollary to that. Everybody knows about low performing academically. Not many people know that there's also a statute in that that's just as weighty on the persistently dangerous. You get 1 per 200 or 5 incidents per 1,000. That's 0.05% of acts of violence at your school. If you exceed that, you go on a watch list, and if you exceed it 2 years in a row, your school will be reconstituted. That means you will lose your job, just like being low performing. Now, here are the things, we'll cover these more in depth: assault with injury, assault with weapon, death, kidnapping, rape, robbery with a weapon, sexual assault, sexual offense, or indecent liberties with a minor. If you have those happen on your campus, you have to report them. It can't be a secret. You'll get fired if you don't report them. If you do and you exceed the total 2 years in a row, then you will be out of work. Just like if you're low performing 2 years in a row, you'll be out of work. So those government pieces, that's federal law, they will come back and get you. Disciplinary data, not reporting to law enforcement all law violations, that one will get you. Trying to hide things that happen on your campus, cover them up, punish the victim. All of those have made headlines in the last month or so. The national case in Virginia, where they punished the girl to try to get her to be quiet about the rape. This will get you. If you don't report everything that happens on your campus to law enforcement as required by law. We'll go over disciplinary data reporting next week. Prayer cannot be staff-led or mandated. Student-led or initiated is legal. This speaks to, you can get in trouble for doing these things in terms of making kids do things against their will. Students have rights now. Student dress and publications can be regulated to avoid school disruption. That one will get you if you let kids dress inappropriately or publish inappropriate things, especially in social media about your school. You do have the right to regulate that. Search and seizure. Know the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Strip searches are not permissible. I know that you think, well, God, Dale, everybody know it happens every year. That one will get you a pink slip. Zero tolerance policies are illegal, are not legal. That means if you do this, you're out. You can't do that. Kids get due process. Abuse, neglect, and harassment must be reported to law enforcement. I've got a couple of questions about that and a couple of activities this semester about that. But for some reason, we think, well, we'll just launch an investigation. No, those are crimes. You got to report them to law enforcement. If they tell you to go ahead and start the investigation, then you can. But you're not to investigate on your own because you're not qualified. Giving out private information, it's federal law, FERPA, that says you can't do that. Due process, you know, substantive and procedural. Understanding that substantive is what does it say that kids are due, and procedural is what you did, that you must follow all laws of due process. And then finally, the thing that gets you is you engage in either arbitrary or capricious actions. Arbitrary is me and Dr. Griffin Jordan were out behind the gym smoking. You called us, you sent her back to class, and you shot me. That would be arbitrary. It'd also be capricious because nowhere in the handbook does it say you can shoot Dale for smoking. That's a little too much punishment for the crime. Now, a couple of these are going to come into play with your first case study. Arbitrary and capricious, due process, zero tolerance. Those things are going to play into your first case study. Will cheating strike Bobby out? And so you need to refer back to these things. These are the statutes. These are the things that matter. But this is what I think will get you. Now, obviously, if you steal the money or something like that, or if you're having inappropriate relations with people that you supervise, yes, I get those two. But I'm talking about in the normal course of business, these are the things that will get you. Everybody knows that you can't have relationships with the help and that you can't steal the money. That's kind of understood. But these are the things governance wise that we don't always know that these will get us as well if we're not following the law on these. I will stop my share, and I see our time is about up. I will ask each of our resident principals, I'll let them close this out. Tell me one thing that I didn't have on my list that governance wise that you need to be really careful of as a school principal.
Well, you named them all. I was trying to think as you were, as I was putting my notes down, you would come up with it. So I did find one, retaliation against a staff member that had a grievance, or even a
Yes.
staff member that put their name on the transfer list.
Yes.
And the principal knows now they're gonna treat you bad. You can't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, that's in personnel law, absolutely. That falls under the same category as a due process. You can't act arbitrarily or capriciously against a faculty member or a student. That would be capricious to do that. That is correct. Dr. Holloman, close us out for the evening.
I'm going to give you one more that I think you'll find in almost all board policies now, and it includes personal communication through social media with students and staff.
Great.
That seems very innocent, and I know that everybody in our group tonight probably at some point in time is friends with a coworker. Once that level changes and you're now a supervisor, you need to be very aware of how muddy that water can become and how quickly. And also include students that you may know through an outside setting. What you see publicly there as a friend, all of a sudden the entire conversation can change for you. And there's a board policy in your school system that specifically speaks to it for both students and staff. And I think that's one that we're seeing that happens a lot more now with staff members trying to be friendly with students through social media, and sometimes administrators being friends with staff members and also their parents and students outside as well.
Excellent. Just as is the law, you can't have inappropriate relationships with people you supervise. You cannot have inappropriate communication with those people either. It's not just physical contact or sexual or nature. You also can't have communication with people that you supervise of an inappropriate nature. Excellent. That's a great one. All right. I'll open it up to the group. Is there any questions anybody has for this evening? Any housekeeping matters that we haven't covered tonight? I think I've gotten to all the questions that came in the chat tonight. Again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to unmute yourself, turn your camera on. We'd like to see your faces. And if you want to just put them in chats, that'll be fine as well. But make sure that if you have questions, you ask them in one form or the other. I think our time is up. I appreciate your participation. Again, great work on the discussion boards that come in, and I look forward to seeing your OMA Task 1 soon. All right, everybody stay safe over the weekend and the bad weather again. I will see you all next Wednesday. Resident expert principals, thank you both again. Your input is most valued and appreciated. Everybody have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you. Y'all have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.